Welcome to the roller coaster of midlife. I'm your host, Lucy Q. Now, have you ever found yourself caught in the drama of workplace dynamics, grappling with conflicts, or just trying to articulate your value? What about your knack for negotiation, or sometimes lack thereof it? How does this affect your career growth? Joining me today is Yvette Durazo. Growing up as the youngest of a lively band of 7 siblings, Yvette emerged as a natural negotiator, be it elbowing her way to the last piece of pie at a family dinner or championing peace resolutions for the corporate world. Yvette truly has a gift for harmonizing even the most discordant of notes. Welcome, Yvette.
Thank you, Lucy, for inviting me over to your podcast and to your audience. Thank you.
Okay, I just have to say your background is gorgeous. You said you were coming to us from where did you say it was?
Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
And it's beautiful, and you can probably hear the birds in the background. It's just stunning. I'm jealous.
Thank you.
So now I'm one of 4 kids. I'm number 2. So I kind of have a little bit of an understanding when it comes to the dynamics of larger families and having to sort of fight your way to get what you want. Can you share a little bit about your journey and then how you were able to transfer that to the corporate world?
Yeah, definitely. I never realized that I had that natural skill until years passed and I found myself researching master's degree programs, and that is when I bounced into the field of alternative dispute resolution. Um, as you already mentioned, I am the youngest of 7 children, and the interesting thing is that my mom was not expecting me. She thought she was already in a menopause, and then I ended up showing up, and so my siblings were older than me when my mom had me. So therefore, it was a very interesting life experience because somehow I was able to learn from the older ones. And I was able also to figure it out. You know, it was like me being a psychologist inside a family because I was able to observe people's behaviors and then trying to figure out what will work for me, what will not work for me, and also figuring it out what were the trigger points of each individual in the house, my brothers and sisters, and then what was the interest base that will allow me to get away with little things or to negotiate things with them. And then as I was growing up and I was older, I noticed myself that I would be the one calming them down whenever they were arguing with my parents or among themselves. And I would just come in very naturally and I would start talking to them and trying to figure out so that they can communicate better. And like I said, I never took that as a trait or as a skill until I ended up going into this master's degree. And little did I knew back then that in alternative dispute resolution field, there was this piece of mediation. I never have heard about mediators until then. And that is how it happened. That's when I realized after finishing up my degree, going into doing my consulting business, it's like, wow, I have been doing this very organically and I never realized. And I love what I do.
That's funny because you were talking about the trigger points for your siblings. Most of us grew up, we knew damn well what our trigger points for our siblings were, and we pushed those buttons every chance we got.
Yeah.
But you looked at it from a different point of view, and you, with the youngest of 7, you did have very different dynamics to deal with. So you learned how to adapt and how to make the best of that situation.
Yeah, and growing up, I would see my siblings as older and I was like, why are you behaving that way? Why are you saying those things and you're triggering my other sister or brother in that way? So I would be like doing psychoanalysis, just sitting down and just observing the behavior of these adults, because they were adults already when I was still a child. And so that created that dynamic of learning from the environment, but at the same time be able to research from the environment.
You were
And then
obviously
picking up, yeah.
yeah, you were very perceptive as a child, for sure.
I had to in order to survive.
So if we translate that into today's work environment, and for women in particular, what sort of gaps exist there when it comes to that conflict resolution, and how it impacts leadership roles?
Well, with women, I think that it is important to start by creating the awareness as to what is it that make up who you became as an adult, as you were a child. How did you grow up? What were the messages that not only your parents but society was giving you, so that you can start creating awareness, because that is what you're bringing into the workplace. Sometimes we think that when we go and study a degree, and we can go all the way to a PhD, that we will be very well off because we have that education. But in reality, when you go back or you go into an environment where you're going to be working with people, it's a micro community. Yes, everybody in that micro community influence each other, but at the same time, you're bringing your innate people skills to work with all of these people. And you might already be aware of this, that throughout our educational system, there's no such a thing as classes in people skills. You might have probably gotten a communication skills that gears more towards public speaking. You might have gotten perhaps a degree in psychology, and probably that could help you a lot. But many of the other fields of study, they don't have negotiation, conflict resolution, which is vital to any human. We do that with our own selves every morning that we wake up. Every morning that we wake up, we negotiate and we are trying to resolve inner conflict, and then outer conflict when we're going to go out into our office and how we're going to figure things out. So I think that it is very vital for women to really to start paying attention as how is it that they're programmed, and what are the programming that needs to take place in order for them to be able to gain certain skills and transform their behavior, so that they can be able to resolve conflict more intelligently and be able to be good negotiators.
I have taken conflict resolution classes before, workshops, and
Mhm.
not once did anyone point out to me to look at how things were when you were a child and within your own family dynamics, because that impacts how you're showing up today. Not once. It was always about listening to the other person and finding common ground and all of those good things. But not once was I ever sort of said, hey, look, check back to see how you were as a kid. How did that communication? Because a lot of us, especially when we're talking about the Gen X woman, a lot of us still grew up in homes where your parents said, and that was the end of it. There was no discussion. It didn't make a difference. It was like, I've said it, that's the way it is, whether it's right, wrong, or otherwise. And so we never had that opportunity
Mhm.
to negotiate. And I mean, a lot of siblings, as I said, I had one of four. I know a lot of people I grew up with was only one of two. And still the conflict resolution, those, with not having those skills ever taught to us, it was always, you know control. Even in schools, there was no place for discussion or negotiation. It was, these are the rules, you either followed them or you didn't. So it's not surprising that a lot of people are lacking these skills.
Yes, it is unfortunately very common. I see it everywhere. And that is why I created the book in conflict intelligence, because I realized that uh, erroneously we're thinking that you're going to pick up skills from a 1 hour conflict resolution class, and that is very typical and very common in the workplace. A lot of companies think that you or used to think, because things changed so much in this past 4 years, that they used to think that, you know, conflict resolution was just a soft skill, that it wasn't not necessarily needed. And in reality, it is an essential skill. And the leaders, when they go higher and higher up, that's when they realize that the people skills are extremely essential. And that is when in the privacy of their offices, they ended up getting the coach, they ended up getting, people that will help them whenever they're dealing with these type of difficult conversations, conflict, and things like that. And then everybody else in the workplace, they don't know how to handle conflict in the workplace. And then the patterns or the processes of the workplace do not provide room to address the human side of the conflict. And I say this because we tend to believe that the human resource, because it has human resource written in the word, will deal with that. And the reality is that the human resource professionals, and I'm telling you this because I literally went and got a certificate program in HR, because I was trying to figure it out. Why is it that HR does not have these conflict resolution facilitated processes, mediation skills, and they don't teach them? And I'm trying to change that. And that's why I approach the school, chair, and said, we need to start teaching these things to our HR people. And they don't. They probably, maybe an HR person might have taken a class here and there, just like you did in conflict resolution, but they usually go through the policies and procedures, right? Because
Yeah.
the idea is that the afraid that they're going to be sued somehow, the company is going to be sued. And you have legal counsel, that well-meaning educated professionals, that all that they see through their lens is risk, right? And through that risk, they work with HR, in through that risk uh, viewpoint, they work with these HR people to work on policies and procedures. And if people don't follow those rails, then you have to get rid of them, or has to get rid of a person that is not necessarily sometimes the person that is creating the conflict, but necessarily removing people from scenarios, or getting rid of them in order to mascate or to bring down or de-escalate the conflict. But then the human situation is never addressed in the workplace, and that is what it's affecting everybody. And especially right now that people change because of what we have been dealing with, the pandemic, the political instability, not trusting our medical system, the diversity, equity, inclusion situations, all of that has changed people's ways of thinking. And in the same way that you're treating employees in the past is not working. That's why we're having a lot of people not wanting to go back to work, not wanting to go back to the office. It doesn't feel safe for people to go back to the office. And we really need to shift the way that companies are doing business. The business model that they use to run the company, to run their people, which is the most important asset in an organization, is just not working right now.
It's always been my perception, because I have worked for larger corporate companies and smaller ones as well. It has always been my experience that HR is there primarily to protect the company, not the
Yeah.
people. And they do
Mhm.
everything that they do is to protect the company first. And you
Mhm.
alluded to that when you said that they're afraid of getting sued, and they take care of
Mhm.
certain aspects and not others. But I mean, the dynamics of the workplace have been gradually changing over the last few decades, and we're seeing that change exponentially now with everything that's going on. Because if you think back to our parents' generation, many of our parents worked for the same company their entire careers. They got their
Mhm.
golden watch and they retired. I think now the average lifespan of somebody with any one company is, I think it's 2 to 3 years.
Exactly. And especially in the Silicon Valley area where I developed most of my work there, you can see, the movement constantly, young, and especially the younger generation. You talk about Generation X, but in the younger generations, I'm still finding um, a lot of misunderstanding of how to deal with difficult conversations, negotiation, conflict resolution, and because of the adaptation of the younger generations to be working in computers, texting more, and everything in a mechanical process, it also does not bring them to a space in where their way or their mechanism to avoid people is to be behind a computer or behind a text, and that also affects their ability to be able to work together with people, right? And I think that it comes to the effect that back in the other generations, we have those well-meaning parents that stay for years, right, in a corporation, and they learn how to stay quiet. They learn how to not raise questions. They had to learn all of that, and then the children were taught that in the house, right? Like you were saying, you don't question things. You don't ask for things. You this is the way it is, and you don't ask for more, right?
Yeah.
And now the other generations, because they have more information readily available everywhere, their level of thinking has expanded, but yet they still use the mechanisms of a computer or laptop or whatever you can think of in order to buffer up the situation of being around people or being with people, because they are also lacking that ability to conflict resolve, negotiate, and things like that.
But it is a topic that comes up because we have two sons that are 21 and 24. So they're part of that younger generation that seems to be
Mhm.
conflicting on several levels with, call it the Gen X or the boomer generation. They're just not seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. And from what we've seen, a lot of it comes down to those labels that you spoke about earlier, whether it's, your views on politics or healthcare system, different
Mhm.
societal things that are changing. There are all these labels that are put on every individual. Everybody's
Everything.
adapting all of these labels that I think it's causing. And I don't like labels because I find labels,
Mhm.
all they do is create more divide. And I
Mhm.
can't blame our younger generation that were raised and told to keep sticking all of these labels on themselves, to then get
Mhm.
to an environment where you're somebody like myself, where we didn't have even 70% of the labels that are sticking around today. So you
Mhm.
can see how the conflict can arise because
Mhm.
you have one group that's looking to subdivide on that, and then you have another group who's just like, hey, like there's just not that many labels to associate yourself with.
Yeah, you bring a very good topic with the all of the things that are happening with the diversity, equity, inclusion, and unfortunately, media and a lot of the media is really focusing on just the minor things about diversity, equity, inclusion, where there's a bigger lens about how to really be in an inclusive environment, and what is important about diversity, equity, inclusion, that it's not only the race, not only the labels, it's everybody, it's people with disabilities, it's everybody. And they're just, we're just being focused through the media and through people's perception of what is important. It's only about the labels. It's only about race. And at the end of the day, it's all about making people feel inclusive and that they belong.
Yeah.
And in order to do those two things, you just have to learn how to be a person that brings about and respects humanity, right? Not, like you said, not creating all these labels, all of these divisions, all of these things that we're just being a tunnel vision being focused on.
Yeah, so
and
true.
and that is what I am concerned in these years, that I have seen a lot of focus on certain trainings in diversity, equity, inclusion, that they forget in all of these trainings that the most important skill or the most important ability to be able to bring about into these groups that are being formed in organization is having somebody that will genuinely know how to facilitate the communication in order for other peoples to be heard and not censored. Because these groups sometimes get together out of volunteer people, and they're not training them, they're just allowing them to go out and get together, hoping that things are not going to go well, and eventually these things are going to go away, because the sometimes the companies don't want to take a lot of work on that. But I know that the bigger companies now, they have to, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's very unorganized, and you have well-meaning people volunteering to do these things, but then people are people. People are going to bring their own perceptions, they're going to bring their own judgments, they're going to bring their own egos into the communication. And if you don't have people who are very well trained and having these difficult conversations, facilitating, then what is ending up happening is that now the desk of the HR people, professionals are getting bombarded with formal complaints, because people are just offending each other in those groups, because
Oh, I
there's
hate
not.
that word. The word offended. I'm so tired of it.
I get that, but that is exactly what is happening, because we're seeing it more and more and more. And then
Yeah.
on top of that, we're dealing right now with a society that it has been dealing with a lot of trauma, because whenever you put a human being to so much change, it creates trauma in the brain. There's no other way around. And
Definitely.
we as a society have been constantly bombarded with so much change that even if you're not aware of, you have some level of trauma. And then on top of that, people become extremely sensitive, right? And then on top of that, you have people siding and creating all divisions without even realizing that that is what is affecting humanity as a whole.
Yeah, definitely all of the trauma. And we have definitely had our fair share of trauma in the last few years. I think overall humanity is feeling somewhat raw, so that some of these things just sting that much more because we are so raw. And it's not an easy solution. We do have to find the common ground at some level, because we collectively need to heal.
Mm-hmm. And that is the roles of, now that the companies need to take care of as well.
Something they
Before,
never expected either.
exactly, and that is the thing, that they were not expecting this. And back in the days when performance was well researched by the big consulting companies, everybody was brainwashed and or drink from the same Kool-Aid, that performance was the most important thing, no matter what. You could have performed all the way up here. You can be a trusting person and do many things that do not show good demeanor or good values, but you were performing at that level, and that's what would get praised. that was to get paid in companies, and be promoting toxic people, and promoting them to a level where it was, where it's not healthy for the organizations. Now with everything that it's been happening in the past 3 years, 4 years, companies are starting to realize that because of that situation, they have to become part of the community to be able to heal people. And it is important for companies to be involved with that, because 80% of our waking hours, if you're working at home or if you're working in an office, if you spend it working at work, 80% of your waking hours. So if companies think that they can get away with saying, no, we don't have to deal with that, that it's part of people's life, and they have to deal with it in the 4 to 5 hours that they're awake in their home, it's not happening. They have to really get involved, because then the individuals also develop a different type of perception, values, and they don't want to deal with a lot of drama in the workplace. That's why people are refusing sometimes to go back to the office. They still have the issues when dealing with people in the computer or in a laptop or in a Zoom. They don't want to go to the office and deal with the human side of it. People are so tired of what has been happening that they don't want to go in and deal with that more. And then on top of that, going to the traffic and adding more to the stress level.
But
that when you get to work, it's you're
let's
a
face
bomb
it,
already.
if you're sitting in your home environment and you get a shitty email, or somebody's short with you, or they're not respectful of you on a Zoom call, you can get up and like you're out of that environment right away.
Yes,
the threat,
and no.
you're removing yourself from the threat. So but when you're in the workplace, yes and no, it's still going to be there. You still have to deal with it at some level.
Mm-hmm.
But in the workplace, a lot of the time you can't escape that. So you can see how the pressure intensifies if you're in the workplace and you're dealing. And I have dealt with some god awful people in my time, that when you're in a workplace, you can't get away. You can't get away. You can have them do whatever they want, and you still have to sit there with a smile on your face and essentially be okay with something that's not okay. I can understand why people don't want to return.
Yeah, and you still deal with with the uncomfortableness, even though that you're at home. You still have difficult sleeping, knowing that you have to still deal or send out that email. You cannot imagine how many people I've been working with in the past 4 years that people will think, oh, they're at their home, they're better off. No, they still having the same anxiety, and still taking them hours out of their day just to respond to an email because they received that shitty email, or they perceive that email in a very aggressive way, that now they have to respond and they don't know how to respond. Or should I respond the same way, or should I not? But then I have to calm myself, and it takes hours out of their day. And this is what our leaders in organizations are not seeing. And that is where the leaky bottom line in organizations happen, because they're not seeing that in reality, that if they don't address the human conflict in the workplace, these hours of the day, if you multiply these hours by all of the number of people that are dealing with it in the organization, it's going to mount out
got a lot
of
lost
money.
time, for sure. Lost time, lost money, for sure.
And what I notice very commonly when I have been reached to coming into organizations, I ask them, what is your budget for getting a mediation and a training? We don't have a budget because we were not expecting this to happen. And that is another thing. You have, the company has budgets for everything, but they don't create a budget to either train people on these skills or bring consultants like I to come in as a neutral third party to be able to create more peace building in the organization. And I know that the word peace building, we can change it to harmony if you want. It's not a very well welcoming word in an organization, because somehow there's this belief that has to be dealt with outside of work, that people have to deal with these things outside of work in order to build a peace or harmony and just come to work. It doesn't happen that way, because you have humans working for you.
I mean, I don't understand why peace wouldn't be an objective of any business, because it's like in your own family. If you have a happy, peaceful family, everything flows, things get done, everything works. If you have conflict and tension in your family, well, then the wheels fall off of that wagon.
Exactly. And what I'm meaning with peace in the workplace is, if people understand that there are bad conflict and then there's good conflict, and you can transform bad conflict into good conflict, the good conflict will help the organization create, innovate, and move forward. The bad conflict is the toxic one that will hold and create little punches in everybody's energy, and in the budget, and in the money that it's coming in, and it's been draining. But these are the things that are not being seen, because HR, for example, has that little reputation that they're the to-go-to people to be able to resolve conflict. And they're just going to do it their way without even making people aware that it will cost more to bring somebody new into the company than just really dealing with people's behavior, right? Or people's psychology. How many times we have seen that people only need "I'm sorry" just to get on and move on with their lives. Many times, because that is that part of us that want that little respect, that want that little acknowledgement, and then you can move on with life, right? And that is all that people need. Yet you're removing people away. And one of the things that I can share with you, that I'm not coming with all this information from a standpoint of research and education. I'm coming here with all of this information and this knowledge and this wisdom from me being in those shoes of people that I deal with. I have been the one that had been bullied, that had cliques, that had situations in where I had to be the one that had to walk away from an organization because they were going to side with somebody else that will create more of a hassle or a problem in a legal dispute because they were from a different race, right? I had to be the one that had to say, okay, now I have to leave, or now I have, now I have to walk away, right? So I'm coming from those standpoints and seeing it from a perspective of how is it that I can be of contribution now that I know what I know, right? Now that I have this degree, now that I have this experience, how can I bring contribution to organizations and their leaders in order to create more conscious organizations, right? And on top of that, I always compare that I was raised by a father that didn't have any education whatsoever. And I was raised in an environment in the workplace, and he had a business, and where he treated people, his people, the employees, like gold, like that they were the most important asset in the organization. And I grew up seeing that. And I grew up to see the effect of that my father was being respected. People were loyal to him. They never, to this hour of the day, when I talk to these people, they said, have never experienced anywhere else a human being like your father. Because he was, he was respectful. He would take care of the employees. Like if, and then the employees in return, they were loyal. They were taking care. not only of the business, but also the family, because they see it as that person is contributing to my life. Why am I not contributing to the business, right? To make the business better, because then I benefit off of that. And you can get perhaps the same thing, but water it down if you mistreat people, because they're going to do it out of force. They're going to do it, but you're never going to get the trust, and you're never going to get the loyalty, and you're never going to get that positive energy that goes into the workplace, that then everybody benefits, not only internally, but also externally to your customers.
Yvette, we are definitely going to need more people like you in the world to help fix some of these problems that are running deep in all of the corporations that are going out there. Now, as we wrap up today, did you have any final words of wisdom that you wanted to share with our listeners?
Thank you. Well, as we started, remember I mentioned about creating this awareness. I really want to invite everybody in your audience to really think about, how is it that you tend to resolve or deal with conflict? And a lot of people don't even question or think about that. And that is a pivotal point to realize that perhaps you have very limited tools in order to be able to resolve issues. You might have also very limited tools to negotiate in the workplace, especially when you're negotiating your salary, right? So it is important for us to really think about, what is our behavior around that? And what is it that you really need to do in order to advance or to create more awareness into bringing in skills and behavioral transformation in order to become more conflict intelligent? The more we do this in a collective base, if everybody takes responsibility on this, we will have better society. We will have better businesses, right? We will have, better community members. So that definitely, it's not only the companies, but it is also people willing to be able to open up and realize this, and be able to be genuine and think about, what is it that you can do to contribute to your family, to your organization, if you are that transformation as well, right? Because this is not about expecting anybody else or the companies to give you the training. Yes, it is important that companies take the responsibility to help leaders in the organization. And when I'm talking about leaders, is not only the higher ups. I'm talking everybody can be a leader. If you provide these skill sets to anybody in the organization, wouldn't the company benefit if let's say the administrative assistant can de-escalate the conflict, can treat people with so much respect that it's a good reflection out of the culture of the company outside into the community? Everybody benefits, right? So if we can do that, then we're going to be able to create better organizations, better communities to work with, right?
I think we can take that advice both in the workplace and in our lives as a whole. It all applies. Thank you for that. Now, my goal for the roller coaster of midlife is to empower women like you to thrive in this amazing chapter of our lives. So go on, embrace the adventure, and start rocking midlife like the badass that you are. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends, because our greatest power is in our community. And don't forget to visit my website, therollercoasterpodcast.com. Click on Start Here. And this is where you can get your free audio course, 3 steps to go from hot mess to badass and start rocking midlife. I'd like to thank you, my listeners, for joining us today. And Yvette, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you for inviting me.
And until next time, keep riding the roller coaster and embracing the adventure of midlife.
Ride